and welcome back to the next episode of this Healthy Life podcast. I'm very excited for my guest today. I have Dr. Patrick Porter, who is an acclaimed neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and founder and CEO of BrainTap, which is a cutting-edge fitness company for your brain, and it's transforming millions of lives around the world. And I have actually gotten the opportunity to try this as well, so very excited to share my experience using the tool and also dive deep and learn about all the science and insight behind it, and hopefully that this can help someone else on their path to having better cognitive function. So Dr. Porter, welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to start with a little bit of an introduction about yourself, some of your background, and kind of a little bit of an intro into exactly what BrainTap is and what that does for helping your cognitive function.
Sure. I've been in this field pretty much my whole life. My dad was a Silva method instructor, which is a meditation process, which used something called the Silva sound, which will put you into alpha. So we might get into the brainwave states for those who aren't familiar with it, but it's a meditative state. They call it neutral for the brain. And when you're there, you have access to creativity, relaxation. It turns on a system of the body called the parasympathetic. So I grew up with actually running around with my dad in Lower Michigan doing seminars every other weekend. He would do them. It was like a franchise, if you will. He was the trainer for that area. So I grew up with that. And then I went to school for electronics. And so that's why when people say, why do you have this technology with meditation? And I said, well, I love the two things. I loved technology, but when I got into I was working on robots, which is nothing like what we have today. Back in the 60s and 70s, when I was going to school, robots were more like solenoids and nothing like smart systems we have today. I might have been more interested in robots today than I was back then. But my dad got me into, I got to work for a company called Light and Sound Research. We developed the very first portable light and sound machine called the MC Square, because we all liked Einstein. So we thought this could release our brain's potential. And I talk about it in my very first book called Awaken the Genius. I've written 9 books, but that was the first book. And it was all about accelerated learning techniques, because my background at the time was teaching teachers how to accelerate learning in the classrooms. And so that kind of expanded out into having a franchise company called Positive Changes, which I sold in 2002. And then in 2013, when that company went out of business, I sold it in 2002, but it went out of business in 2012. So I got back all of my materials and I recreated myself with BrainTap. And that's where we're at today. Because I took what used to be, like if you think of the old stereo systems where you had the stacked components, it used to be 4 different components stacked. And we were able to shrink it down to fit into a headset. So when you think about the light and sound system that we have now, we utilize light, sound, and vibration to use a science called frequency following response, which we'll go into a little bit, to tune up the brain. And we call it brain optimization, because we can optimize brain function by using our environment. This is part of the cornerstones to something they now call biohacking or health optimization, because when we can affect our external world, which then affects our internal world, we know that this has a direct mirroring effect on our brain. And we can go into that in a little bit of detail. But basically, we have over 2,000 sessions, and we have 4,000 clinics out there in America that are using it. But we have 120,000 users out there also using BrainTap to improve their lives. And our mission is to better 1 billion brains. So if you're listening, I'm hoping we incite you and motivate you to be one of the billion.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what BrainTap is. So in my experience, you put on a headset, it kind of covers your eyes. It uses different lights and sounds to kind of get your brain into a meditative state. So can you share a little bit about kind of how it works and what a BrainTap session would feel like for someone?
Sure. First thing, the mechanics of our body, we all have something called mirror neurons in every cell. And that mirror neuron is actually 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every second, every minute, every hour, is evaluating your environment. And then based on the frequency of the environment, which means like when we were kids, we might have walked in on our parents and they're having an argument and we could feel the tension in the air. That's because our cells are all vibrating. And when we feel that tension. So, but also if we go near the ocean, that's a 10 hertz frequency, because water resonates at 10 hertz, then we get into alpha. That's why people love being around that area. Or if we go to the mountains at 7.8 hertz, which just happens to be theta. So these different, our body is used to adjusting its brain frequency based on the environment. So we're using that, but we're using sound, which most people know about as binaural beats, but we've actually taken it to another level, we use something called isochronic tones. And that's really what Silva did. It's something you can use in a mono environment, which means you don't have to wear headphones to experience it. In our classrooms, which were around the world in classrooms, they call it brain prep. And a lot of the schools that use it, they'll actually play it in the whole school because you can just use the sound alone. So people are wondering, you can do it with just the app if you want to. Now, you're not going to get the same level of response, but you are going to get a response because the cells are still responding to it. What we did, which was different than anybody before us, was we did what's called biocular. So we're doing the same thing that binaurals do, but we're doing it with the visual cortex, and we're using the optic nerve to actually trigger the brain to stay awake. Most people don't realize when they're meditating without help or without training, they're actually stressing out their brain because their default mode network, that internal voice, we call it the monkey mind, if it goes crazy during meditation, we've actually shown that most people are doing more harm than they are good. And that's why only 5% of the people that start meditating continue. So they don't get the benefit because their brain doesn't shut down. What we showed is if you can train the brain through this light, sound, and vibration, which is the frequencies, those lights that we have, the eye lights that you expose to when your eyes are closed are going between 0.5 and 100. Now, why that's important is if Erica, if we were on your spaceship going to Earth and we were to be close enough to the Earth, the Earth frequencies would be between 0.5 and 100. And everything in nature responds to it. In one example I like to give is when we had that tsunami that hit, if you go back and look at the YouTube videos, there's no animals there. Because the animals could feel the vibration of that big wave coming in. So they got the heck out of there and saved themselves. Where people were not they weren't connected to the earth. They're running out after the wave, not realizing that they're going to get hit by 100-foot tsunami or however big it was. I don't think it was 100 foot, but it was pretty big. And so nature is always telling us or communicating with us. If we are around a volcano going off, it could be up around 80 to 90 hertz frequency. When, like I said, when we're in the mountains, it's 7.8. When we're near the water, it's 10 hertz. So what we're doing is we're using that light, sound, and vibration to train the brain. Now, what most people don't know, and we've done this in our labs since the 80s, back then we didn't have all the equipment we have today. So we have a lot more equipment some people ask me, did you go to school for neurophysiology? And I go, there was no neurophysiology when I had to learn it all. I was learning on the job. And I was around before they had the first, what they call EEPROM chip, which is a programmable chip, because we used to do this all by hand. So if you can imagine, I'm looking at somebody, I'm looking at their respiration rate, I'm looking at their skin temperature, I'm looking at different things about their physiology, which is called biofeedback. And that's what we were doing. And we really created this technology to get people out of pain. And we did a study in Brazil just recently, 2 years ago, where we beat out opioids in a study. Most people don't realize that opioids were designed for 4 weeks of use. That's what they were approved for. Now, I don't know about you, but not very many people stay on them for 4 weeks. They stay on them for longer. So in our study we did, everybody was on opioids because they were in pain. But our group, after 4 weeks, was able to get off the medicine. The other group was still on them. And the reason was, I always tell people, you can't have the pill without the skill. So we need to train the body, which is the world's greatest pharmacy. Because what we know is that when we're going through these different brainwave states, most people understand we have a mental health problem in the world today. But it's not a mental health problem. It's a physiological problem. People are sitting too long. They're not moving their body. Our brain needs movement and breath in order to function. And so when we're sitting too much, our brain actually starts to atrophy or the system starts to shut down. So they actually say that sitting is the new smoking. So what we're going to do with BrainTap is we're going to use light, sound, and vibration to move the neurological system and to really regulate. There's 3 systems of the neurology that we work with. One is called the parasympathetic, which is the one to rest, digest, and recover, which most people are striving for, and we're supposed to get when we sleep at night. And that's when we should be building up our neurotransmitter bank account, because as we go through that sleep cycle, each corresponding brainwave tells our gut to make the neurotransmitters. There's 54 of them. Now, if we don't get the deep level sleep, we're not getting all the neurotransmitters made. So then we wake up in the morning, we're starting out at a deficit. Now, most people are are super stressed all the time. In fact, they say we have a neuroepidemic of sympathetic syndrome, which means people are running around, they're super stressed and they don't even know they're stressed anymore because it's just a normal thing for them. But there's also a part of the nervous system called the neurohormonal system, which is our biological system, which a lot of people will, take supplements and things like this, which is good. But if you are stressed out, then that system doesn't come online. So a lot of people are taking really good supplements, but as long as you're stressed out, the body isn't metabolizing, digesting, and using them. So when we always say that there's 3 phases to brain fitness, number 1 is a diet. You can't outthink a bad diet, so you have to eat right. Number 2 is you need to move and breathe. So we have a lot of different exercises we teach people, especially if they're going through dementia and things like that. We have different exercises that they do. But then they have to do some kind of neuro training. And that's where BrainTap comes in. And it's very simple. We have 3 different times of the day, which we can get into a little bit more in the talk. But there's different meditations, if you will, or different trainings. We call it brain fitness because we can actually measure the neurological shift when you're doing it. Unlike meditation, a lot of times people will meditate, there's been no physiological change in their body or in their nervous system. And we've measured 30,000 brains. So we've only had a handful of people that actually move the nervous system when they're doing their own meditation. Now, breath work is different. If somebody's doing really good breath work and they've been trained, we find that has a really strong effect on the nervous system.
Interesting. Yeah, everyone always kind of gravitates towards meditation, like kind of almost like you said, forces themselves to do it. And it's so hard to shut off your brain. Like I learned like TM, like transcendental meditation. Yep. I did it for a little bit, but I kind of just got out of practice because I was like, my brain was just so loud, like it wasn't quieting. And so it's like hard to kind of force yourself to try to relax when you're having a hard time relaxing, doing the relaxing thing, right? So it's like almost a little counterintuitive. So I was actually really impressed. So as I mentioned at the biohacking conference, I had an opportunity to try a short session on BrainTap, and we did some kind of metrics before. So we measured my stress level before and after, and I couldn't believe how much it went down. I think I only did like a 10-15 minute session on it. I did feel like really tired afterwards, but I feel like that was just like my body kind of coming down, and took a little 20-minute power nap and came back, and then I felt great the rest of the day. So it's pretty interesting. I tend to be like a high-strung type A person that probably needs this tool more than anything. So what's a kind of like when you're a user of BrainTap? So what's kind of a regular way to use it? Do you do it once a day, more than once a day? And you mentioned that there's over, I think you said 2,000 or 4,000 different trainings. Yeah. So what are the different sessions, and are there ones for sleep? Are there ones for more energy? Or kind of explain how the system works?
Yes, exactly. There's 3 different types of sessions on BrainTap. So I'll kind of go over what those are. In the morning, we believe, or whenever your morning is, because not everybody has morning and morning, we need to increase a brainwave called SMR. That's the brainwave as we age that atrophies. Like when we did our cognitive decline study where we took everybody off the dementia scale in 6 weeks, we had to have them start with the morning sessions. Those are only 10 minutes. That's what you did at the conference, actually.
Okay. So that made me sleepy.
Yeah. So what happens though, some people, like if you're used to having so much stress and we released it, your body is not going to know what to do. It needed a longer session because that was only a 10-minute one. That's why. Okay. So usually in the morning after you've slept through the night, you don't need as long a session. So we don't spend a lot of time relaxing the body, but you probably needed more. That's why you could do the power nap and then get back into it and do your thing. So, but in the morning, it's really important to do that in the morning because most people think sleep starts at night. Like they do all these mental hygiene and bed things to get ready for sleep. But if I tell people in the morning, it's like getting in a boat and you want to go across the lake, but you're 5 degrees off, but you never correct. You're not going to end up right across the lake. You're going to end up somewhere over here, 25 to 30 degrees off by the time you get to the other side of the lake. So we want to start the day off. We win the morning, win the day. Now, in the middle of the afternoon, one thing is our body, how light energy works in the body, which you might have had some people on your podcast before about it. But for those that don't know, what happens is light energy, the reason we use BrainTap in the way that it works is we use light in the ears and in the eyes, because those are 2 ways we can get light into the brain right away. Now, the brain and the eyes themselves have more mitochondria per square centimeter than any other area of the body. So our eyes are meant to bring in light energy and also transmits light energy. You are actually transmitting and receiving light all the time as a living being. In our brain, all the blood in our ears goes through our body every 45 minutes. So we're going to blood dope, really. The hemoglobin absorbs that light energy. It goes into the bloodstream. When it finds a cell that has less energy or is about to die, they call apoptosis. That energy is going to have an exchange, and it's going to hit the Krebs cycle. It's going to enter that cell. That cell is going to spin up and produce up to 32 times more energy in the form of ATP. So when in the afternoon, the reason that's important in the afternoon is we showed in our study we have a study we did with top performers at Google and Microsoft, where we showed them if they did a 20-minute BrainTap nap, what we call a brain break, that we showed them that they could get 23% more work done during the day by taking a 20-minute break. Because in the afternoon, they really weren't doing that much, because once your brain gets tired, even though you're working, you're not being productive. So, and we showed them that they also had 43% improvement in their sleep just by doing that 20-minute session. But the reason 2 o'clock is so important is every person on earth at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, your temperature drops 2 degrees. That's because it's a natural time for your circadian rhythm, your body to reset. Now at night, your body at 2 o'clock a.m. increases 2 degrees. If your brain isn't balanced, or you're not, like if you're stressed out or whatever, you can have a bigger dip, which can give you symptoms of like blood sugar, things like that. That's why people have to go get coffee or have a protein bar or go get chocolate or sugar or some kind to get them ready in the afternoon. At night, you can wake up sweating. Even though it's not because you're going through menopause, it's because your brain isn't balanced. Once your brain's balanced, you won't wake up in the middle of the night like that, because we're not used to doing that. As a child, most people didn't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. They just slept through it. So in the afternoon, we have sessions we call theta training, which is a deep reboot. So think of it like a 20-minute deep sleep cycle. Now, remember, every one of the brain waves you go through, you're producing, like they showed you the neurohormonal panel on that slide. We increase typically about 30%. We can get people back to where they were in the morning in the afternoon.
Wow.
So now it's normal for the body to diminish during the day, because we're using energy. So think about filling up your gas tank. You can wait to the end of the day and be totally out of gas, or you can fill up and then have fun with your family and friends and coworkers or whatever you're doing when you're not working. So that's what we want to do. Now at night, people will do one of our delta sessions, because they're very different. They take you into deep delta and they drop you off for deep sleep. The reason that's important is in 2015, and listeners might not know this, but they actually found out a new system in the human body. It's called the glial lymphatic system. So think about the lymphatic system in all physiology books before 2015, the lymphatic system stops at the neck. Now, in physiology, they will tell you anywhere there's a blood vessel, there's a lymph vessel. But because the glia, the brain, in other words, the glia cells, which is what the cleaning process that happens at night, they didn't realize that they didn't even operate until you get to level 4 sleep. 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping right now. So that means they're not detoxing their brain. And there's really only 3 reasons why your brain is not functioning at a peak level. Number 1, it could be a trauma. You could have a traumatic brain injury or something like that. Number 2, you could have toxins. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't clean out the toxins every night, you get foggy brain. And then the other is your thoughts. If your thoughts aren't right, we know your thoughts can control up to 3,200 gene expressions. So when you think about who you are and what's going on, every cell of your body is changing every 40 seconds. Because the DNA pairs are changing based on the environment. That means your internal environment, what you're saying to yourself, what's going on around you, everything. I mean, literally everything is influencing you, not just one thing. So, so what we want to do with light and sound and vibration is we're going to overload your senses with new information. So the information around you is no longer dictating how you feel. We put you into what we call a super state, where your body gets put into this hyper state of awareness where you would want to go when you meditate, like when you want to do the TM meditation. I do TM every morning, but I do it with BrainTap. I put it on the gamma sessions and I do my TM meditation and I get a kind of out of body experience. And the reason the TM works for people is you're doing that mantra, right? That mantra is taking your awareness and you're focusing on it. And as long as you don't let your mind wander, you're going to do great, or you do the city program or whatever you're doing with that, so you have these different methods that you do. So we have people using BrainTap with their own meditations. They'll just use a music only session, or they use one of especially the gamma, because we now know gamma is the higher states of consciousness and people who want to get those kind of DMT kind of experience, because GABA produces GABA, which is a precursor to DMT. So your body can create your own, basically get high in your
psychedelic experiences with your own brain. Awesome. And then, so are there any people that shouldn't use BrainTap, especially with like the light and sound, like if someone's like prone to seizures or anything like that? Is there a risk for any populations?
There's a small group of people that are called photaic epileptics. We have epileptics that use it all the time, but you have to be photaic, which means if you can't look at a computer monitor, or you can't watch an LCD screen, or you can't go down a country road where the trees are flickering, or you get nauseous, then you shouldn't use it. And some people will just use it on the lowest light setting. It doesn't have to be bright for it to work. It's not the light that's working in the eyes, it's the flash. And what we found was when you meditate without BrainTap, any meditation, we see that about 30% of your brain goes to sleep, because your brain is an energy hog. And so as soon as you close your eyes, it thinks you're going to sleep. So it starts to shut down the circuits. But in meditation, we want to keep it awake, because you want to have what we call an awakened mind state. So you can think, act, and respond, visualize, do whatever you want to do during that state. And so we need to keep the brain awake.
Great. And then, so out of the 2,000 programs that you have, do you select a new one every day, or how do you kind of go in, or do you kind of stick to a program for a month and focus on one specific thing, or what sorts of programs are available?
Yeah, we have all sorts of programs. We have a 21-day quick start that we recommend people do, that I've selected, because we have intermediate and advanced programs as well as basic programs. And we don't really want somebody to jump right into the advanced programs without training their brain. And so we will train first in SMR, which is it's a high beta, a low beta, high alpha program. So it doesn't take a lot to move your brain there. That's what you listen to at the conference. Now, when you get into the deeper alpha, it's going to take you deeper. So as you go along, and then when you get to theta, that's an even deeper state. Some people will have what we call island time experiences. They'll just close their eyes and they go, hey, what just happened? Where was I for 20 minutes? Because there's no time in these states. And then, of course, the delta, we'd take you down and put you to sleep. So, but we do have series, like if you wanted to do like stress-free me or worry-free me. We have weight loss programs. We have over 200 sessions for weight loss. We have sessions for overwhelm because of what's happened since 2020. We have a whole series on overwhelm that we did. With our 4,000 clinics, our doctors are pretty good at telling us what their patients need. So then we create them, and we're always creating new sessions. I just finished a series here for concussion, because we work a lot with a group called TBRX, which is Tom Brady's recovery program. They're our partner in sports. So they wanted to have a program to work with the athletes for concussion. We have a great concussion protocol. We did a study with it, and we showed 1 year after the protocol, the people that use BrainTap over the people that didn't were 30 to 70% neurologically better 1 year later.
Wow,
so,
that's amazing.
When you start to train the brain, if you don't train the brain or get it out of its stuck state, it will tend to think that's normal. So when you have
just keep declining from there, right?
Yes, yeah. In the brain, if you don't get sleep is so key. So that's one of the biggest things we find with BrainTap is people start sleeping better. Think of sleep as your incubator for your superpowers for the next day. If you don't get that sleep, you're not going to have the energy resources that you need. So you can fool it for a while. And of course, during college, we all did. But then as you get older, you're going to pay the piper, because you don't have the energy levels that you used to have.
Absolutely. And then, so you mentioned that you've done some studies. So what sort of kind of quantitative studies and research have you done on BrainTap and some of these different areas that it can help on? And what have you found in that research?
Well, we've got a lot of research. They can go to braintap.com and see the research page, but I'll mention a few more that we've done. One of the ones we were most excited about was with Seminole College. They contacted us because they wanted to know what we could do for their golf team. Well, since we've been working their golf team, they're 4 years in a row national champions. That's awesome. And what we found out, it's now in a bigger study at Seminole College, is that group had the highest GPA in the school. So not only did it help them with their golf score, it improved their alpha score 90%. Now, these were already elite athletes. They got a college scholarship for golf. So, and alpha is assigned to focus and concentration. And golf is a game that's played in 4 hours, but really, you only really play it for 5 minutes, because when you swing the club for 30 seconds or less, 3 or 4 seconds. So you gotta have those intense moments of intense thought. And then you have to be able to manage your thoughts in between that shot, especially if you make a mistake. So that's really a big one. We had the study we did that's called the Saving Your Brain study is now in a bigger study at Seminole College. We're up to over 60 people in the study now. The pilot program, which is in a book called Saving Your Brain, which Dr. Kelly Miller ran, there's a chapter he dedicated to BrainTap. When we did the study, it was just BrainTap, but he did his whole protocol. I mean, it obviously works better if you eat well, you exercise. You can do more than just BrainTap. But in the study, just using BrainTap 3 times a day, within 6 weeks, every person in the pilot study were removed from the dementia scale. So these were all people that were tested, verified by their medical doctor, they had dementia. And within 6 weeks, and it's all about energy. And what we found was as soon as we increased their brain energy, we can measure your brain energy with something called the WAVI, or there's other techniques too, but we like using the WAVI, which was also at the biohacking event you're at. And
I remember it.
What we do is we can measure, and your brain should be, like when we were younger, most people, their brain will register 18.1 volts across the hemispheres. We had somebody in the office the other week that was only 3 volts.
Wow.
And what we find with dementia is that there's a mismatch. Those two should be matched. So if it's 9 volts on both sides, you'll still be okay. But if it's 9 and 8, like one side of the brain is at 8, one side's at 9, it's almost like the two networks, the Wi-Fi networks, aren't communicating, so the information doesn't flow appropriately. When you and I speak and I ask you to remember your favorite vacation, you're not just going back and starting and lighting up one part of your brain. You could be lighting up to 10, 12 parts of your brain to get that memory, because our brain kind of segments it all out into regions of smell, regions of taste, regions of sight, regions of sound, and then it reassembles it. They call it the representational system. So it represents it to us. And that's where our memory it's not really our memory that's failing us. It's our recall. It's the neurological network that recalls the memory, because they now know in neuroscience, if we take anybody and we under surgery, we could touch different regions of the brain, they would have a full sensory memory without having to recall it, because we triggered the memory, because it's stored in the tissue. But they also know, and this is kind of an exciting research that I found. It isn't our research, but it's something they did with mice, because they like to torture mice. But what they did was they wanted to find out, where do mice store their memories? And so they ran the mice through the maze. As soon as they knew the mice knew the maze, they systematically started taking the brain of all the mice. They started removing it to find out where they kept the memory. They removed every part of the brain of the mice except for the brainstem, and the mice could still run the maze.
Wow.
So what they
crazy.
determined was, and this is in 1994, they determined that the memories were not stored in the tissue, really, they're stored in the field. So if you go to the NIH website and you look up biofield, they actually say that we have an energy field that surrounds everyone. It kind of sounds metaphysical, or something like an aura or chakras that they talk about. And we talk about those too, because we now know that there's a real science there, that there's a field of energy around everything. And we know you and I, even though the reason I can see you and you can see me is I'm transmitting light energy that the computer's picking up and transmitting across, using some quantum technology to make this available to anybody around the world.
That's awesome. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about, cognitive decline. So you say that BrainTap is kind of like exercise for your brain, and obviously you have to eat healthy and, move your body and things like that. So what are some early signs of cognitive dysfunction, and what are things that people can kind of pay attention to and make sure that they're staying on top of? I know that sleep is an important one, and feeling tired during the day, but share some other pieces that people can be aware of as, they start to realize something might be going on with their brain.
One incredible thing you can do that's an early sign, which is kind of a weird one, is go get your peanut butter jar and open it up. If you can't smell the peanut butter, you're probably 5 years away from dementia, which means you need to start doing something. You don't want to get to that point. You want to do something before that point. The one big thing you can do besides sleep is number one, I would say, to get your sleep back, because that's when your body's going to recharge and detox and all those things. But water, most people don't realize if you are dehydrated, even 2%, your brain function diminishes. And your brain is a hydro engine. So that also means omega-3s, because 60% of your brain is fat. If you're doing any kind of statins, I would immediately stop them and get with your doctor, because there's no long-term benefit to those. There's been no study that proved that they actually do what they say they're going to do. And we need that cholesterol in our brain for our neural network. So you don't want to do anything to strip away fat in your body. If you have high cholesterol, it's a diet problem. It's not a pill problem, and I might get in trouble for saying that, but I don't, I mean, they should watch a movie called Statin Nation, and get the facts, because the facts are that it doesn't do anything for you. In fact, it's probably one of the biggest reasons we have so much neuropathy today, because these people are taking this drug and it strips out the myelin sheath on our nervous system. And because it doesn't discern, it's kind of like what's going on with this fat drug that they have now for weight loss, and people are they're losing fat in places in their body they don't want to lose fat, because it doesn't discern where they're losing their fat. So I would say, eat as much omega-3s as you can. Even including avocados, which a lot of people are afraid of because of the fat content. But the good fats are not going to make you fat. The good fats are going to help you burn fat and keep your body regulating.
And keep your brain working.
Yes. And then I would say that a nutrient that everybody on earth should be taking, it's very inexpensive, is niacin, B3. You can get it on Amazon. You can get a bag of it for like $10. It'll last you 3 months. And just start off slowly with it, because you'll get a niacin flush. But the reason I like niacin, and my dad was an alcoholic, so we grew up with AA and Alateens and things like that. And when I did my research, because I used to write programs for the state of Arizona for DUIs, what I found out about Bill, the guy who wrote the big book in AA, was he actually stopped drinking, not by going to meetings. He stopped drinking because he changed his diet. And one of the biggest things he did to change his diet was he took B3, niacin. But they kind of forget to tell people that. You can't just talk about your problems. You got to do something physically too. And niacin is something you can take in the morning. And what it does, it opens up the capillaries. That's what the niacin flush is doing. So
that's why you turn red when you take it, right?
So you get that blood flow circulation, but it also helps with mood. So if you're having mood disorders, it's a really good way to do it. And then, of course, a good multivitamin. And if you have to supplement B3s in that, one great way to do it is like through energy, like green energy drinks. There's energy bits, which were also there at the thing. I love taking those, and they're really good because you're going to get the omega-3 the same way the fish did. You can get it through fatty fish, of course, but if you want to get it direct, you go to the blue and green algae and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Interesting. And then, so there's a lot of talk about like inflammation in the gut and the brain and how that's all connected. What have you found in your research, and can BrainTap also help with kind of that gut-brain axis connection? Are there kind of gut sessions you can do?
Oh yeah, we have sessions for that as well. And there is a definite connection. There's actually 3 brains, I tell people, not just 2. So think about your gut. Your gut has more neuron connections than your brain between your ears. And if you have a leaky gut, which is now, used to be that people thought that dietitians or the nutritionists were crazy. There's no such thing as leaky gut. But now we know if you have a leaky gut, you have a leaky brain. You have brain biome as well as gut biome, and they match. But you also have a heart that has a brain. Your heart has 40,000 neutrino cells, which heart math kind of put on the map, but now there's so much research about it. And what we're finding is that we do a lot with red light therapy with BrainTap. So you can use a red light pad on your gut at the same time you're doing BrainTap, and that accelerates it. You can also put it on the basal ganglia, which is back here, which will light up the nervous system and get the nervous system flowing. So think of light therapy as just an adjunct. It can kickstart the cells. What I'm just saying it does, what BrainTap does for the brain, you can do with red light panels or red light. We have, if you came to my clinic here in New Bern, we have big beds that have it. We have a bed that's a trifecta bed you lay in. There's 12,000 LEDs, that has the different ones.
Yeah, the big LED beds. Yeah, those are great.
So those are all really good. So I believe that most people, unfortunately, do have a leaky gut. And it's going to show up as a leaky gut. Remember, if you have a leaky gut, you have a leaky brain.
Yeah,
so you got to heal.
It goes together, right?
Yeah, you got to heal both of those at the same time. So you can do it. It's best if you do it at the same time. So when you're here at our clinic, we have gut pads you wear when you're doing a BrainTap. Now, you don't have to have that. Obviously, you don't even have to have the BrainTap. You can do things in different ways, but of course, we want to optimize your time when you're here. So that's why we do it.
Absolutely. And then, that's interesting that, I think people have a big disconnect between their gut and brain. So I have celiac disease, but I don't get any gut issues from it. Whenever I get gluten accidentally, it's all brain, neuro, symptoms that I get, and a lot of anxiety, insomnia, and just my brain is really loud and things like that. And it takes 7 days for it to go away. It's if I eat gluten lunch Monday, the next Monday at lunch, it goes away. So it's this huge connection between our brain and how what we're eating is affecting our brain. And I think people have such a disconnect from it. So
there's a great book called The Grain Brain.
Yeah, I've read that one.
Yeah, that's it's fascinating what you, and people don't realize that might be why they are depressed or anxious and have these stress disorders. It could be just the food they're eating, and just by maybe eating spelt bread or something like that, or ancient grains, could be the big difference. Or sprouted grains, some people can handle, like Ezekiel bread or something like that instead of.
I do best on no grains. That seems to be how my brain works the best. So I dabble on gluten-free grains here and there, but I realize if I want to feel 100% the most optimal, it's better just to be as grain-free as possible for my own body, but everyone's different. So you gotta find what works for you. Awesome. So we have time for one more question. So I'd love to shift gears a little bit. And it sounds like you've had a tremendous user pool of people. I'd love to hear one of your favorite success stories of someone that's used BrainTap and has had some major healing with it, or just a really great recovery story that you've had in your experience.
Well, one of my favorite stories happened when a woman came to me and she said that her doctor thought she was crazy. She was given 6 weeks to live. And she had an autoimmune disorder her body was actually, one of the problems is it doesn't discern between your cells that are healthy and ones that aren't. So it was eating at her. And I said to her, well, how did they diagnose that or whatever? This was back before now. They know a lot more about it. And I said, you know what? Let's set you up for a 9-week program. She goes, well, my doctor said she was coming in to just make peace with her life and that she was going to be, whatever. And I said, live every day. I said, the way that the ancients talk about it is you should live every day like it's your last, but plan your life like you're going to live forever. And I said, let's just start celebrating every day. Because she came in, she looked like she was already ready for her funeral. She was wearing all black. She was all depressed. And so we got talking, we got her working. And at 6 weeks, she's still coming in. She's still looking good. And she says, I'm going back to the Mayo Clinic to get to find out what's going on. They said that, how am I doing? I told them I'm feeling fantastic. She's now wearing bright, colorful clothes. She's happy. She goes back in. She comes into the office. She says, I don't know what happened, but they told me that they misdiagnosed me.
No way.
There's nothing wrong with me.
What?
And I said, that's because we have something called the psychoimmunology, our thinking immune system. And what we think plays a big role in how our immune system functions.
Absolutely.
They actually did an experiment during COVID where they took people if you looked at COVID as a threat rather than looked at it as a challenge, those people looked at it as a threat were transmitting 200 times less light through their body. Now that light is what's broadcasting to our cells to upregulate our nervous system or our DNA so we show up as our best self or our not so best self. So we need to, we need to look at life as a series of challenges rather than threats. So it's all about training our brain. So that's one of my favorite stories. But we get stories all the time. I mean, if you just do #BrainTap on social media, you're going to see thousands of people from professional fighters who've used it, to help them win championships. We have 4 of the top world boxers use BrainTap. And they're abusing their brain all the time, so they need to.
They need a lot of recovery. Yes. They need to double their sessions every day. And then, so is there any, speaking of that, is there any benefit to doing a longer session, or is just doing the 10 minutes 3 times a day?
It's actually, there are 10, 20, and 30-minute sessions.
Okay.
So depending upon the time you have, yeah, there is a benefit to doing that. But in the morning, most people don't need to listen to a 20-minute session, because hopefully we got you sleeping well and you're already rested.
All we need to go.
We need to trigger norepinephrine, dopamine, and cortisol in the morning. We don't need to trigger that in the afternoon. We need to downregulate a little bit and replenish the nervous system rather than stress it out.
Awesome. Well, this has been so insightful. I'm so happy that you were able to share all this information, and really appreciate all your knowledge on this and some of those amazing success stories. If people want to find more about you or order their own BrainTap and learn more about BrainTap, where can they find you?
Yeah, if they go to braintap.com, we have a 14-day trial. They can sign up for the subscription. If they don't like it, just cancel it within the first 14 days. You won't be charged. You're only charged on the 15th day. So they could try out what I'm talking about, get on the 21-day program. 90% of people that do that will be sleeping better. If they have a way to measure it, like a BioStrap or a ring or something, they'll see their sleep scores improving. 90% of the people will do that just during our trial. So it's a great way to test for yourself.
Without the whole device?
Without the whole device, yeah, you can do it.
Okay.
You can do that. And then, of course, they can look at my YouTube channel at Dr. Patrick Porter. There's a lot of videos there, a lot of things that our team has put together as far as my talks, little short videos. If they want to learn more, it's all there for you.
Awesome. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well, so that everyone has access to that. So amazing. Dr. Porter, thank you so much. This has been so informative, and I'm definitely going to try out the trial myself. I need to work on my sleep. So I've got my Oura ring. I'll report back how it improves. So I definitely need a little support in that area. So I'll let you know how that goes.
That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.